Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya, Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 111 444 111. But first, here's what is making headlines. Somalia cuts diplomatic ties with Kenya, citing interference. Ghana's opposition candidate John Mahama rejects the results of the country's presidential and parliamentary elections, in which President Nana Akufo-Addo won a second term. We bring you a recap of Africa's gains against wild polio and ebola. We begin here in the country where tension is now rising in Mandera County, with some residents being forced to leave their homes after Somalia National Army troops were spotted taking positions along the border a day after Somalia made an announcement cutting its diplomatic ties with Kenya, and Kenya making new agreements with Somaliland, including opening a consulate in Hargeisa. Reporter David Kagina with more.
Hours after a fallout between Kenya and Somalia after what the Somali's Minister for Information Osman Dubi termed as constant interference with the country's internal affairs and undermining of the country's sovereignty, tension is now rising along the common border. Residents have reported seeing Somalian National Army troops taking strategic positions along the Kenya-Somalia border. The move, including placing technical vehicles at the border point 3, has forced locals to start leaving their homes. Somalia has announced that it will in the next 7 days withdraw all its diplomats from Kenya, with the Kenyan government responding saying it will not retaliate.
So there is a committee that has been put in place to be able to look at those issues that are, coming in between these two neighboring countries that have got a lot of, history between the two of them to be addressed.
While this unfolded, President Kenyatta invited President of Somaliland Musa Bihi Abdi to Kenya, making several bilateral agreements, chief among them opening a consulate in Hargeisa in Somaliland, a move seen as a direct violation to Somali's sovereignty. The two presidents have agreed on a plan to have direct flights with the Kenya Airways and other Kenyan airlines between Nairobi and Hargeisa by the end of March 2021. Citizens of the two nations will apply for a visa and receive visa on arrival by end of March 2021. The two nations have agreed on implementing of exchange programs involving students, agricultural officers, doctors, nurses, and other professionals. Early in the year, Kenyan's expert preempted the fallout, pointing fingers to Somalia's President Mohamed Farmajo.
President Farmajo has almost vowed in his heart that he will never have peace with Kenya. This is a president who is insulting the blood of our sons and daughters who have died in El Ade and other points in Somalia, trying to liberate that country from terrorism and from terrorists from Al-Shabaab, and trying to tell the people of his country that Kenya is interfering with their sovereignty. How do you tell someone who came to help you stand? This Farmajo would never find election if Kenya didn't do what they did.
The two cases have already been filed in court by Somalia, one of them International Court of Justice over territorial dispute concerning the maritime delimitation. David Kagina, Switch TV.
On to other news, Egyptian Health Minister Hala Zayed and the Chinese ambassador to Egypt received the first batch of the Covid-19 vaccines from Chinese drug giant Sinopharm after it arrived on board an Emirates aircraft from the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, Ethiopian refugee Omar Ibrahim has set up a tailor shop in Rakuba, a camp in Sudan. Using a foot-powered sewing machine he rents from a villager, Ibrahim helps fellow refugees by making new clothes and mending the holes in their old ones. Daniel Kariuki fired the report.
I'm the big gingerbread man.
Thousands of people fled war in Ethiopia with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Now in Morocco camp in neighboring Sudan, dozens of destitute refugees from the fighting in the northern Tigray region flock each day to Omar Ibrahim's makeshift tailor shop. Using a foot-powered sewing machine he runs from a local villager, Ibrahim helps fellow refugees recover from the horrors of war and forced flight by making them new garments and mending the holes in their old ones.
Even though I'm not fully satisfied, it's enough to sustain my life, my belly. I left everything I had behind because I was forced to, and I started this job out of necessity, and it's currently sustaining my life. I eat and drink daily thanks to my profession. If I didn't have this job, what would have happened to me?
Ibrahim explains that he struck a deal with Sudanese villager in Kuba. In return for the use of the rusty sewing machine, he hands half of his profits to its owner.
This machine is not mine. I got it from Kuba. I keep half the profits and give the other half to the owner of the machine. And now I am better.
In his hometown, he specialized in making clothes for women.
When I get customers, I charge them according to their means. If they can afford to pay me, I charge them. But if they can't afford, they don't have money, I help them free of charge. Because we are all of one person in this camp.
In Kuba camp, a sprawling refugee settlement that the UN says currently houses some 13,000 refugees. He mends and sews new clothes for men, women and children.
There are people looking for an opportunity here, but they cannot find anything. So by doing this work, I am helping others to survive as well. There are many people who have skills but are doing nothing. That is why I am happy to doing this work, to be able to serve the community.
Despite the pain and loss he has suffered, he remains driven by a belief in self-reliance, the importance of serving his community.
No one hates their country, but if there is no peace, you cannot survive. If there is safety and security, everyone here will go straight back home. Where there is peace, we will go back because there is nothing like your home.
Now in Kuba, he worries for his elderly parents who decided to stay behind in Humera. His work as a tailor helps him both to earn a living and to fight his sadness. Living in a string of camps dotted along Sudan's border with Ethiopia, most of the refugees must rely on aid to survive. Many simply do not have the means to pay Ibrahim for his services, so he changes according to their means. Some 49,000 Ethiopians have fled in Sudan since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government launched a deadly offensive against the Tigray region, ruling party on November 4th.
Away from that, Morocco confirmed that it will resume diplomatic relations with Israel and calls Washington's decision to recognize Moroccan sovereignty over the disputed territory of Western Sahara, which is a historic position.
Following a telephone call between the U.S. President Donald Trump and King Mohammed VI, the Moroccan ruler said that his country will resume official contacts and diplomatic relations with minimal delay with Israel. Thanks to the work carried out during the last 3 years by His Majesty the King, through emissaries, through direct contacts, through active involvement, today this is crowned by a recognition by the United States, the great power, the permanent member of Security Council, the influential actor on the international scene, a recognition of the Moroccan Sahara and the sovereignty of Morocco over all its territories, including the southern provinces.
Y compris les provinces du Sud.
Morocco and Israel had respectively maintained liaison offices in Tel Aviv and Rabat since 1990s, even before closing them in 2000. A senior official at Morocco's foreign ministry described the breakthrough with Israel as not a recognition, but a normalization, a resumption of relations that existed before. The king said that these measures do not in any manner affect Morocco's ongoing sustained commitment to the just Palestine cause, according to the royal statement. He reiterated Rabat's commitment is the solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict based on the two states living side by side in peace and security.
Parallèlement à ça, Sa Majesté a annoncé au président que le Maroc prendra des mesures.
At the same time, His Majesty announced to the President that Morocco will take concrete steps to resume a relationship with Israel on several levels. Through, of course, the overflight and the landing of direct flights, on the basis of taking into account the fact that Morocco has a large Moroccan Jewish community living in Israel and has kept a strong link with Morocco, which comes every year to celebrate the religious and other activities and a family. This henceforth will be direct flights between Morocco and Israel. A liaison officer was opened in 1994 until 2002. It will be reopened to accompany the economic dynamics and technological cooperation between the two countries.
Il sera réouvert pour accompagner la dynamique économique et de la coopération technologique entre les deux pays.
The Moroccan king also sent his sincere thanks to the US President Donald Trump for his decision to recognize Rabat's sovereignty over Western Sahara, a disputed and divided Spanish colony mostly under Morocco's control, where tensions have simmered since 1970s.
Our focus now on matters health. The World Health Organization announced the official eradication of wild polio in Africa after the last cases in northeast Nigeria 4 years ago. The Democratic Republic of Congo also announced an end to 2 outbreaks of Ebola. Both diseases were successfully beaten thanks to vaccinations. Here is a recap of Africa's gains against wild polio and Ebola. And now let's take a look back at the end of Ebola and eradication of wild polio in Africa this year.
The Ebola outbreak in the eastern DRC was declared over June 25th. It lasted nearly 2 years and was the world's second largest Ebola outbreak on record. A total of 2,299 people died in the outbreak in the DRC's North Kivu and Ituri provinces. Of more than 3,400 infected, 1,162 survived.
I'm convinced that my child was suffering from chest pain. I didn't see any signs of bloodshed. He had no diarrhea and was not vomiting. He was doing well without showing any of these signs. He just had pain in his chest. If he had diarrhea or if he were to have vomited, he would have gone to the general hospital. Then we would have known it was Ebola.
Our country is still facing another outbreak of the Ebola virus in the Equator province. This is the 11th epidemic in our country.
As the outbreak wound down in the east on June 1st, Congolese authorities reported another outbreak, this time in Equator province in north. This outbreak was declared over on November 18th.
Some cases are located in remote areas surrounded by rainforests, demanding additional capacities and resources for the response.
This Wednesday, 18th November 2020, I'm pleased to solemnly declare the end of the 11th epidemic of the Ebola virus disease in the Equator province of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Celle-ci est la 11e épidémie dans notre pays.
Ebola is a highly contagious hemorrhagic fever. An outbreak is declared over 40 days after the last patient is cured. The Ebola outbreaks were curbed thanks to mass vaccination programs with the help of the World Health Organization. The WHO declared Africa free from wild polio on August 25, 2020, and the last case was diagnosed in the northeast Nigeria in 2016. Polio cases severe disfigurement and paralysis and can be deadly. It especially affects young children.
August 25th, 2020 marks a huge day in the history of the fight against polio. After 4 years without a case of wild polio, The WHO African region has finally been declared free of wild polio virus.
When we were in our various communities, we didn't even know that poliovirus vaccine meant. But we came to the town, we got to know about it. I delivered 2 children and they were immediately vaccinated at the health center in which they were born.
Mass
vaccination campaigns again drove the eradication of the disease. 5 of the WHO's 6 regions are now certified wild polio-free. It still occurs in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
While the world watches intently as scientists work to ensure safe and effective vaccines are developed for COVID-19, it's important to ensure that all children receive the life-saving vaccines that are already available.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. Switch TV Kenya, Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Keep sending in your feedback via 111 444 111. We'll be back after this short commercial break. We tell you how Eritrea refugees living in Tigray have been forced to flee the conflict in Ethiopia. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Let's now focus in Mozambique, where a woman known as Aziza Falume gave birth on the run. Her story is one among many of displaced people in Pemba, which has been crippled by deadly jihadist raids since 2017.
The gunfire broke out before dawn, waking Aziza Falume as the jihadists mounted a new attack in their campaign in northern Mozambique. 9 months pregnant and with no news of her fisherman husband, she had no choice but to flee.
When this started, I was on the beach fishing. When I tried to reach my home, I couldn't. These criminals were there. They had already arrived in Pangen. They started making problems very early. I couldn't get home. Everything burned, lost. I don't have anything left. I only have this boat.
Falume roused their 5 children and they made their getaway from the coastal village of Pangani. She gave birth on the run. Falume is one of the tens of thousands of displaced people in Pemba, the capital city of gas-rich Cabo Delgado province, which has been gripped by deadly jihadist raids since 2017. Around 2,300 people have died, many of them poor villagers, and some 500,000 people have fled their homes. By good luck, Falume found her husband on the beach, and the family boarded a small boat headed south. They stopped at a nearby island, and there the inevitable happened.
I came with my family. That child over there is mine, and with my wife. The woman who gave birth on the way is my wife. When she left Matemo Island, she gave birth on the boat.
A baby girl named Awa, which translates into suffering in the local Makua language, was born in a small house on the island.
I was 9 months pregnant when I left Matemo. On our way to Pemba, I started feeling pain. That was when we stopped at Kwiziwe Island, where I gave birth. And after that, we continued the journey to Pemba.
Breastfeeding Awa and flanked by the rest of her children, Falume is still haunted by the night of the attack.
I am still afraid. I don't know if they will come or if they are here.
The family has been taken in by a good Samaritan in Pemba, a town of 200,000 inhabitants before the crisis that has since nearly doubled in population. The displaced arrive on overloaded fish boats. Falume's husband, Aju Wazir, relieved the torment of the hours before he was reunited with his family. He was out fishing and failed to return home due to the fighting. I just stayed on the boat, he said. The militants set the village ablaze and he lost everything. He is grateful for the temporary shelter, a single room he is sharing with his family. But our survival is difficult. The family's host is Atima Tawabo, a volunteer whose job is to record details of new arrivals in Pakatike, the main landing district of Pemba.
The first days they couldn't sleep, especially the mother because of the baby. The other children slept because children are like that, they sleep. But the mother and her sister, the sister couldn't sleep because of fear. Then I said to them, you can relax now that you are here. That was before her husband arrived.
Farida Mwarabu, a 32-year-old mother of 5, is a neighbor from the same village. She arrived in Pemba a few days after them. Living with her mother, Mwarabu is still traumatized by her chaotic escape. The family fled into forest, but in the thick of the night became separated from each other. It was only 3 days later that she found her daughter. With no news on the whereabouts of her husband and son, she boarded a boat to Pemba along with dozens of others. There, she found shelter in her mother's house. 26 people, some who fled the violence from various parts of the province, now squat there, with barely any food. She held out a ray of hope that one day all this will be over and I return home. I have nothing here except my family.
And this perhaps might be a double tragedy, because already living as refugees in Tigray, which had been long a safe haven for them during years of conflict and repression in Eritrea, they have now been forced to join thousands of people fleeing the conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Take a look.
Among the thousands of people fleeing in the 5-week-old conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region are a few dozen men, women and children from Eritrea, one of the world's most authoritarian states.
We heard about 96,000 refugees from Eritrea in Ethiopia who are being assisted in several camps in Ethiopia. And out of those refugees, we've actually received about 28 refugees, former refugees who are in Ethiopia have arrived in Amdayet.
They were already living as refugees in Tigray, which had long been a safe haven for them during the years of conflict and repression in Eritrea.
In this conflict, there's a lot of displacements going on, and I would imagine our refugees who are in the camps find themselves in this difficulty, and I'm sure they must also be displaced within Ethiopia. And I'm sure the humanitarian agencies are right now actually trying to identify them and support them.
But when Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Mohamed's government launched a military operation against Tigray's ruling party, the Eritrean refugees' illusion of safety was shattered as violence escalated around their camps. Keda and his family had originally settled in one of the refugee camps in the Shiraro area of Tigray, near the Eritrean border, around 2 years ago. Seated on a bench under the blazing midday sun with fellow Eritrean refugees, Shishe Yakobu, a 46-year-old with a short goatee, says he arrived in Hamdayet just days after the violence erupted in Tigray. Like Keda, he does not know where his wife and 4 children are, though he believes they may still be at Hitzat's camp near Shiraro in Tigray.
I feel so sad and get worried about leaving. We came from Eritrea because of conflict and instability, and then the same happened in Tigray. It's very sad. I guess I am not lucky in life.
In 2018, Abiy took power, ending years of political dominance by the Tigray People Liberation Front, sworn enemies of the Eritrean president, Isaias Afwerki. Abiy and Afwerki signed a historic peace agreement that same year, winning the Ethiopian leader the Nobel Peace Prize. After the dramatic shift in alliances, Abiy's forces launched their operation in Tigray on 4th November. Eritreans who had long benefited from protection in Ethiopia appear to have become a target. Since then, a few Eritrean refugees have managed to escape to Sudan. The UN, meanwhile, has expressed fears for the safety for those still in Tigray, home to some 96,000 Eritrean refugees living 4 refugees camps. Along with some 36 other Eritreans, Keda has found shelter in Hamdayet reception camp, with camp authorities keeping them safe, separate from the Ethiopian refugees. According to camp manager Yob Mohammed, the Eritreans, like the Ethiopians, are safe in Sudan. But he worries for the Eritreans still in Tigray after what he describes, citing the refugees themselves as an attack on refugee camps in Sheraro. On Friday, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi said he was deeply alarmed by the safety and well-being of Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia caught in the conflict in Tigray.
We need this to lead us to make peace because we are waiting for peace so that we can go back to our country. Ethiopians can go back to Ethiopia and Eritreans to Eritrea. All we want is peace.
Prior to the conflict, UNHCR and other aid agencies provided aid for Eritrean refugees in the camps in Ethiopia, but most UNHCR staff have since been evacuated out of concern for their safety, and Ethiopia has restricted access to Tigray. If confirmed, the presence of Eritrean soldiers in Tigray would represent a major shift in a conflict that has already pushed nearly 50,000 people from Tigray into Sudan, according to the UN figures. Saza Munga, Switch TV, Nairobi.
Well, that's all here on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya, Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. My producer has been Harry Chimea, my director Antoinette Dede, and my name is Joel Chacha, and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, do have yourself a great day.